call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I was already awake, on my second cup of coffee, watching the snow fall outside my kitchen window in Toronto. My phone displayed my brother's name, Glenn. We hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, not since our last tense visit to our mother's nursing home. "Douglas," he said, his voice carrying a forced seriousness that immediately unsettled me. "I have some difficult news. Mom passed away last night, peacefully in her sleep." I placed my coffee mug down as my hands began to shake. "What? When? I was planning to see her today." "The funeral is Friday," he continued, cutting me off. His tone turned almost transactional. "I've already taken care of everything. And Douglas, about Mom's estate, the will is very clear. Everything goes to me. The house, the Muskoka cottage, the investments, all of it. You get nothing. Don't even think about contesting it." Then he hung up. I stood in my kitchen staring at my phone, stunned. My mother was supposedly gone, and Glenn's first concern was to warn me about the will. There was no sympathy, no reassurance, only a threat. Something felt deeply wrong. To explain why, I need to go back. My name is Douglas Harrison. I'm 64 years old, a retired civil engineer who spent 4 decades designing infrastructure across Ontario. My wife, Catherine, died 3 years ago after a battle with cancer. We had one daughter, Emma, now 28, who works as a marine biologist in Vancouver. After Catherine's death, I focused on volunteering and spending time with my mother, who supported me through the loss. Glenn is 4 years younger than me, 58. We were close growing up, playing hockey in the driveway of our North York home. As adults, however, we drifted apart. Glenn became a real estate agent, married Patricia, and had 2 children. From the outside, his life looked stable, but over time I noticed warning signs. He was always chasing larger deals and often appeared financially stretched. There were quiet conversations at family dinners about failed investments and about Patricia working extra shifts as a nurse to support the household. Our mother, Helen Harrison, was 85 and sharp for most of her life. A retired school teacher, she could still recite poetry from memory and regularly won at Scrabble. She lived independently in her Richmond Hill home until about 9 months ago, when Glenn insisted she needed additional help. He proposed becoming her power of attorney to manage finances and medical matters. Mom was hesitant, but Glenn persisted. As her youngest son, he eventually convinced her. That decision marked a turning point. Within weeks of Glenn obtaining power of attorney, Mom was suddenly diagnosed with severe dementia. Glenn moved her into Maple Grove Care Center, stating she could no longer live alone. When I visited, I was alarmed. The woman who had been lively and articulate now sat quietly, staring into space. She didn't recognize me and spoke only in short, confused fragments. I questioned her physician, Dr. James Whitmore. "She was fine 2 months ago. Is this really possible?" "Dementia can progress quickly in some patients," he replied calmly. "At her age, decline can be sudden." His explanation didn't fully convince me. I continued visiting Mom 3 times a week. Even when she didn't know who I was, I held her hand and talked about Emma and my volunteer work. Glenn visited far less often, and when he did, he always seemed rushed, frequently checking his watch. Standing alone in my kitchen after Glenn's call, his words finally made sense. This wasn't grief, it was calculation. I immediately called Maple Grove Care Center. "I'm calling about my mother, Helen Harrison," I said. "I was told she passed away last night." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison, but I don't see any record of that. Let me check." My heart raced. A few minutes later, the nurse returned. "Sir, your mother is fine. She's having breakfast right now. Is there some misunderstanding?" I sat down slowly. "Please don't tell anyone I called, especially my brother," I said before hanging up. I then called Emma. She answered on the 3rd ring, concerned. "Dad, it's barely 7 a.m. there. What's going on?" "Your uncle told me Grandma died," I said, "but she's alive. Emma, I think Glenn is trying to take her estate." There was a long silence. Then she said quietly, "Dad, that's elder abuse. That's fraud. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I replied, "but I need to act quickly." He said the funeral was Friday, 3 days away. After speaking with Emma, I spent the rest of the morning making calls. First, I contacted a lawyer I had worked with before on a construction contract dispute. I explained everything to Robert Chin. He didn't hesitate. "Douglas, this is serious," he said. If your brother holds power of attorney and is misrepresenting your mother's condition or misusing her assets, this could involve criminal charges, but you'll need proof, clear, solid evidence. Next, I hired a private investigator named Sarah Mitchell. She came to my house that afternoon, a sharp, professional woman in her mid-40s with gray strands running through her dark hair. "How long has your brother had power of attorney?" she asked as she took notes. I told her it had been 9 months, right after Mom was suddenly declared to have dementia. Before that, she had been fully capable, volunteering at the library, playing bridge twice a week. Then, almost overnight, she supposedly couldn't remember her own name. Sarah nodded. "I've seen situations like this before. Give me 48 hours. I'll look into what's been happening with your mother's finances." That evening, I drove to Maple Grove without calling ahead. When I entered Mom's room, she was sitting in her usual chair by the window, watching the sky grow darker. Her hair was thinner, her face more worn than I remembered. But something felt different. She seemed less sedated, more aware. I pulled a chair closer. "Mom," I said quietly. She turned her head, and for a brief moment, her familiar brown eyes met mine with something that looked like recognition. "It's me, Douglas, your son." Her lips moved as if she wanted to respond, but before anything happened, a nurse came in to check her vitals, and the moment passed. I drove home through the snow, my thoughts racing. What was Glenn planning? A fake funeral to convince everyone she was gone? Then quietly moving her assets while no one questioned it? It sounded outrageous, but the more I thought about it, the more calculated it seemed. The next morning, Sarah called. "Douglas, you should sit down." I was already at my kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear. "Your brother has been very active. Over the past 8 months, he's transferred roughly $280,000 from your mother's accounts into his own. He also sold her Muskoka cottage to a numbered company. I'm still tracing it, but I believe he's connected to it. He's been using her credit cards as well. And there's more. The doctor who diagnosed your mother with dementia, Dr. James Whitmore, he went to university with your brother. They've been close friends for 30 years. I felt nauseated. If Mom's condition was being caused or worsened by medication, too many sedatives or antipsychotics, it would explain the sudden decline in vacant behavior. That wouldn't just be negligence, it would be a serious crime. Sarah agreed. "That's what we need to prove," she said. "I'm requesting her medical records, but that takes time. For now, keep visiting your mother. Document everything, and if you can, record conversations with your brother. Ontario allows one-party consent." That afternoon, I returned to Maple Grove with my phone ready to record, but when I reached Mom's room, it was empty. A nurse I hadn't seen before was changing the sheets. "Where's my mother?" I asked, my chest tightening. "Oh, Mr. Harrison," she said calmly, "your brother took her out for a drive. He said she needed some fresh air." My stomach dropped. "When?" "About an hour ago." I ran to the parking lot, but Glenn's black Mercedes was already gone. I called him. No answer. I called again. 5 times in total. Nothing. 3 hours later, they returned. Glenn helped Mom out of the car, guiding her as she slowly made her way back inside. She looked exhausted and disoriented. When Glenn saw me waiting in the hallway, he didn't look surprised. "Douglas," he said, clearly irritated, "what are you doing here?" I didn't hold back. "You told me Mom died yesterday, yet here she is." He actually laughed. "Oh, that. Sorry about the mix-up. I meant to call you back. She had a bad episode, and with dementia, these things happen." "Where did you take her today?" I asked. "Just for a drive. She likes getting out." I looked at Mom. "She can barely stand." His expression hardened. "Back off, Douglas. I'm her power of attorney. I make decisions about her care, not you. If you want to challenge that, get a lawyer." He brushed past me, settling Mom back into her chair and speaking to her in a low voice I couldn't hear. Then he walked away without another glance. I was about to leave when my phone buzzed. An unknown number appeared on my phone. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" There was silence, then a faint whisper, a woman's voice, weak and strained. "Douglas?" "Yes." "Who is this?" "Douglas, it's me." The voice was so quiet I pressed the phone tightly to my ear. "Who?" "It's your mother." I froze. That didn't make sense. Mom was in her room, and this call was coming from... I checked the screen. A blocked number. "Douglas, listen carefully. I don't have much time. You need to come to my room tonight after 10. Make sure Glenn isn't here. And don't tell anyone about this call." The line went dead. I stood in the parking lot as snow fell around me, staring at my phone as if it were something unfamiliar. It felt impossible. Mom could barely speak in full sentences. And yet the voice I heard, even soft and breathless, sounded like her, the sharp, clear woman I'd known my entire life. I waited in my car until after 10 p.m., watching the nursing home. Glenn's Mercedes was gone. The night shift had taken over, with only minimal staff. I used my key code to enter through the side door and went straight to Mom's room. She was sitting up in bed with the lights dim. When she turned toward me, I saw it immediately. Her eyes were clear, focused, fully aware. "Close the door," she said in a steady, normal voice. Not confused, not slurred, normal. I closed it, my hands shaking. "Mom, what?" "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk and we don't have much time." I sat there stunned. "Are you okay? What's happening?" My mother, whom I believed was lost to dementia, smiled. A real smile, the one I remembered from childhood when she caught Glenn and me sneaking cookies. "I'm fine, Douglas. I've been fine the entire time. But the dementia, the diagnosis, you didn't even recognize me. Because I was pretending." The room seemed to tilt. Pretending? She reached for my hand. Her grip was firm and steady, nothing like the fragile hands I'd held for months. "I'm 85, she said calmly. "I've been thinking about my life and about what happens when I'm gone. I realized I needed to know something. I needed to know which of my sons would truly care for me, not for money or inheritance, but because they loved me." "So you pretended to have dementia to test us?" When Glenn suggested becoming my power of attorney, I saw an opportunity. I agreed, but I also spoke to my own lawyer, someone Glenn doesn't know. Weeks before he got POA, I placed most of my assets into an irrevocable trust. The accounts Glenn controls only held enough to show me what he would do. I struggled to process it. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" Her expression softened. "Because I had to test both of you. I needed to see who would visit me when I couldn't offer anything in return, who would sit with me, hold my hand, even when I pretended not to know their name. And you did, Douglas. 3 times a week, you talked to me. You stayed." Tears ran down my face. "Of course I did. You're my mother." "I know," she said gently. "But Glenn," she shook her head. "Glenn failed, worse than I expected. I've documented everything. Every time he pressured me to sign papers. Every time he grew angry when I acted confused. Every time he took something from this room thinking I wouldn't notice. It's all recorded. The $280,000 he took came from the accounts I left accessible. I've been letting him expose himself." "He told me you were dead," I said. "He's planning a funeral for Friday." She nodded. "I know. He told me today during our drive. He said I was going to have an accident, that I'd pass away peacefully. He wanted me to sign papers first, but I refused and played confused. He's running out of time." "This is dangerous," I said. "We need to call the police now." "No," she replied firmly. "Not yet. Robert Chin, your lawyer, has been my lawyer for the past month as well. We have a plan, but I need you to trust me." I squeezed her hand. "Always." Over the next 2 days, we put everything in place. Robert involved the police, but discreetly. They agreed to allow my mother's plan to continue so Glenn could be caught with clear, undeniable evidence. Small hidden cameras, no bigger than buttons, were installed in Mom's room. We coordinated carefully with select nursing home staff we knew we could trust. Throughout it all, Mom continued her role, acting confused and increasingly frail whenever Glenn was present. Glenn came by twice more. The first time, he brought documents for Mom to sign, papers transferring ownership of her house. Mom scribbled something unreadable and acted as if she didn't understand what she was signing. Glenn's irritation was obvious. "Just sign it properly, Mom," he said tightly. "I'm trying to help you." The second visit, late Thursday night, was far worse. He brought a syringe. I later watched the footage, and it made me physically sick. He told Mom it was her medication. We had it tested afterward. It was an extreme dose of sedatives, far beyond anything appropriate. Mom pretended to take it, discreetly hiding the pills. "Tomorrow," Glenn said as he smoothed her hair, "tomorrow you'll finally be at peace. No more suffering." Friday morning arrived. Glenn had booked Thornhill Funeral Home. He sent out notices and called relatives. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years called to offer condolences. I went along with it. Yes, the funeral is at 2 p.m. Yes, it was sudden. By the time the service began, the funeral home was full. Glenn had spared no expense. Flowers everywhere. A large framed photo of Mom from 20 years earlier displayed at the front. He'd even written an obituary filled with sentimental language about a devoted mother after a long illness. I sat in the front row with Emma, who had flown in that morning. Across the aisle, Glenn sat with Patricia and their children. His expression was calm, appropriately somber. Patricia kept touching his arm, offering quiet support. The children looked genuinely upset. They truly loved their grandmother. At exactly 2 p.m., Glenn stood and walked to the podium. He adjusted the microphone and began. We are here today to honor the life of Helen Margaret Harrison, born February 14, 1939, passed January 7, 2025. Mom was an extraordinary woman, a teacher who shaped young minds for 35 years, a mother who always put her children first. In her final months, she trusted me to care for her. She knew I would protect her interests, manage her affairs, and make sure she was comfortable. He paused, his voice breaking with emotion I now knew was entirely fabricated. Mom always loved me most. She told me that many times. She knew I was the responsible one, the one who could handle everything. She wanted me to have her house, her cottage, everything she worked for, because she trusted me to use it wisely for the family. I stood up. Every head in the room turned. That's interesting, Glenn, I said clearly. Would you like to tell everyone where Mom actually is right now? A wave of confusion spread through the room. Glenn's face drained of color. Douglas, sit down. This isn't the time. Where's the body, Glenn? I asked. Where is Mom's body? She's being cremated, he replied quickly. We discussed this. Really? Because I called the crematorium. They don't have her. Patricia grabbed his arm. Glenn, what is he talking about? At that moment, the doors at the back of the funeral home opened. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was my mother. She walked slowly with a walker, but her posture was straight and her eyes were sharp and alert. 2 uniformed police officers followed closely behind her. The room erupted. People stood, gasped, and whispered. Someone screamed. Glenn's daughter began to cry. Mom moved steadily down the aisle. When she reached Glenn, she stopped and looked directly at him. Hello, son, she said calmly. I'm not dead, but your inheritance is. Glenn's mouth opened, then closed again. Mom, you're confused, he stammered. You're sick. This is a mistake. I'm not confused, Glenn, my mother said calmly. I've been recording everything for the past 8 months. Every threat, every theft, every attempt to pressure me into signing documents that transferred my assets to you, and every time you drugged me to keep me compliant. She turned to face the room. Many people were crying, some in relief, others in disbelief. I'm sorry for deceiving all of you, she continued, but I needed to know the truth. I had to see what my son would do when he believed I was helpless. What I discovered broke my heart. One of the officers stepped forward. Glenn Harrison, you are under arrest for elder abuse, theft over $5,000, fraud, and attempted probate fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Glenn tried to run. He pushed past the officer and headed for the door, but he made it only a few steps before he was taken down and handcuffed. His children were crying. Patricia stood frozen, her face pale with shock. As Glenn was led away, he shouted back, I'm your son. You can't do this to me. I needed that money. My mother watched him go, tears on her face, but her voice remained steady. You were my son, but you stopped being my child the moment you decided my life was worth less than my bank account. The legal process lasted for months. Glenn initially tried to fight the charges, claiming my mother was incompetent and that he was acting in her best interest. The evidence proved otherwise. There was video of him trying to force her to sign documents, audio recordings of his threats, and bank records documenting the theft. Dr. Whitmore testified after being granted immunity, admitting Glenn had pressured him to prescribe unnecessary medication. In the end, Glenn pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, ordered to repay the $280,000 he had taken, and fined an additional $50,000. He permanently lost his real estate license. Patricia divorced him and received full custody of the children. They were deeply affected, and Emma and I did our best to stay involved in their lives and provide stability. Dr. Whitmore lost his medical license for knowingly prescribing dangerous medication to an elderly patient without proper medical justification. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario showed no leniency. As for my mother, she moved into a small condominium near my home. She was finished with the large house and the responsibility of maintaining property. She wanted to be close to family and close to Emma when she visited. We had dinner together twice a week. She returned to volunteering, this time at an elder abuse prevention center, sharing her experience to help others recognize the warning signs. With part of the recovered money, we established the Helen Harrison Elder Protection Fund. It provides legal assistance to seniors facing financial abuse and supports education on power of attorney responsibilities. About a year later, my mother and I sat on my back porch watching snow fall across Toronto. She held a mug of tea wrapped in a blanket. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "The way you tested us?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it was necessary," she said. "I regret that my own son was capable of what he did, but I don't regret learning the truth. I needed to know who would love me when I had nothing to give. You gave me everything that mattered." I told her, "You taught me integrity. You taught me that doing the right thing matters, even when it's difficult, especially then." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "That's why you passed the test. Not just because you visited me, though that mattered, but because even when you thought I was gone and believed you'd get nothing, you fought for what was right. You protected me when I couldn't protect myself. That's what family does. Real family. Blood alone doesn't make you family, Douglas. Love does. Choice does. Showing up does. Glenn was my blood, but he stopped being family the moment he treated me like an asset." We sat quietly, watching snow gather on the fence and bare trees. Inside the house, I could hear my phone buzzing. Emma was probably calling from Vancouver for our weekly check-in. Maybe Mom's lawyer had updates on the charitable fund. Life was moving forward. Mom looked at me, her eyes still sharp and clear. "You know what the saddest part is?" she said. "What?" I asked. If Glenn had just asked, if he'd been honest about his financial troubles, I would have helped him. Not with everything, not enabling bad choices, but I would have helped. Instead, he chose to steal. He chose to treat me as if I were already gone. And that choice cost him everything. I didn't know what to say, so I just held her hand. This remarkable woman had taught me more about strength and dignity in the past year than in all the years before. She survived betrayal by her own son, orchestrated her own rescue, and came through it determined to help others. That's the thing about family, the real kind. It's not about blood. It's not about inheritance. It's about showing up. It's about loving someone even when they can't give anything back. It's about standing up for what's right, even if it means opposing your own brother. Glenn made his choices. He chose greed over love, theft over integrity. And he's paying, not just with prison, but with the loss of his children's respect, his wife, his career, and his mother's love. As for me, I received something far more valuable than any inheritance. I gained real years with my mother, years to talk, laugh, and heal. I learned that when tested, I could do the right thing. And I had the opportunity to help other families avoid what we went through. Blood does not excuse betrayal. True family protects the vulnerable. Sometimes the bravest thing an 85-year-old woman can do is appear helpless just to find out who will help her when she can't help herself. That is what I learned from Helen Harrison, my mother, my hero, the woman who showed me that dignity matters more than dollars and that real love shows up, especially when there is nothing to gain.